psychology too, though, because I think a lot of people simply look at certain communities and think, oh, policing is always the big issue. It's always crime, you know? And the first thing that came to your mind, talking to the people, was economics, you know? And that it really matters to people what the cost of living is, how the jobs work. I mean, I would imagine we're on the transportation and the busing issues all the time, because to us it doesn't seem, you know, in a such situation of separate but two unequal Durhams, the Bull City connector sure doesn't look like data to me, and I see which way which one runs, you know, and it...
Yeah, I think that the transit issues are critical, the jobs issues are critical, and they all very directly influence the issue of crime. When you have a city that's economically strong, where folks have jobs, where folks have low-cost transportation to get to those jobs, and where kids have social and recreational and educational opportunities that they find rewarding, that's going to reduce crime. You know,
for sure.
Folks who don't have those opportunities and who don't feel that sense of community are the people who are more likely to turn to criminal activity for ways to, you know, provide for their families, or just because they don't see other options for themselves. So I really think that one way, you know, they're all interconnected. Like,
right.
I think we tackle crime through an economic development strategy that really lifts up the voices of folks in those communities that have the most direct experience and can tell us more, you know, most effectively what their people need.
Yeah, and are we getting some of that? I know Charlie Reese brought up the Holton Career Resource Center when we were talking to him, and I had actually just sat out there for a meeting between the citizens and the police, where Chief Lopez and Nia Burney from Spirit House and various other people were on a panel, and people use that as an example of sort of like, well, they put all that money into the Holton Career Resource Center, and it's this big old building, and the community doesn't use it, you know, and so I don't think it's necessarily that our current city council hasn't tried, but I think there's certain things where you could really point out an unequal Durham and say they've been ineffective. So what is it that you see that you're hearing, or you think that you can do, or that gives you hope that we're still at this tipping point and we can do something effective?
I think it's all about priorities, and where do we, you know, we have a limited amount of money. We have a growing tax base in Durham. We're lucky in that.
For sure.
A lot of cities are losing folks and we're gaining folks. So I think that we are getting more resources, and we can count on more resources coming into the community over the next few years.
Provided we don't give them tax breaks to come into the community, right?
There is that problem. And yeah, I mean, I think that we can push harder. Like, I think that for a long time, Durham's leaders saw Durham as a place where we really had to incentivize businesses. Right. And folks to come into the city. So we were giving away these tax breaks, we're giving away these development incentives, these jobs creation incentives, et cetera. Now I think, you know, Durham has arrived in a way that is not, you know, it's not how things were 10 years ago. We don't have to just give away all of these tax revenues. Folks want to be here. We are desirable. So I think we need to shift how we're thinking about what we're giving away, and, you know, still be bringing development to the city, but how are we doing that in ways that really still preserve the city's ability to get things done and do public projects? With regard to Holton specifically, you know, I think that what I've heard is that a lot of the programs there are not free, and so and that there aren't as many programs as there need to be, and then a lot of the programs you have to pay for. And for a lot of folks, you know, that's just not doable. Who gets that? Are we paying
the city when we're paying?
The city Parks and Rec. So and again, priorities. Parks and Rec serves a critical function in our community, providing children, especially young people, with recreational opportunities, and also just for people in general. You know, ball fields, soccer games, like that. The health of our community is really dependent on having those open spaces and outdoor resources, and I think that's something that the city should prioritize, and that a lot of those programs, you know, if we put money where it needs to be, those programs could be free.
Totally agree. Have you had an opportunity to interact much with Durham Parks and Rec? What do you think?
My only interactions with Parks and Rec have been, you know, as a consumer. I visit
Right, you
parks.
have 2 kids, right?
I have 2 kids, so we go to the park all the time. We live in a great area where we're walking distance from 4 parks.
Awesome.
So we kind of switch it up and go to different ones, which is great. And we've hosted events in the parks, and have gone to
Because I
So
feel
that's
like you could kind of chase that the same way you could chase transportation with a separate but unequal. There's some gorgeous parks in Durham, and there's some parks that look like nobody looked at that park in an awful long time. Still got a jungle gym and some pavement that you can land on underneath it.
Oh,
which,
God.
That kind of attitude of like, well, this park, important. This park, well, what neighborhood is that? I don't even see that on my map. And
Yep.
I don't know that, I don't know exactly how that all works and how the funding works and how much of it is private, people helping out, because I have seen sort of those public-private partnerships in Durham be really effective.
Yeah, there's a park right around the corner from me on Carroll Street that just had a renovation that was partially funded by some nonprofit private money.
Is that Carroll over by Birch?
No, it's Carroll by Moorhead, just north of
Oh,
Moorhead.
okay.
Yeah. The Birch Avenue Park is beautiful.
Right,
we
right.
love that park. We're walking
Yeah.
distance to that one too. Great
Yeah.
for toddlers.
Another one that they
beautiful.
turned around, I think, with some public-private partnership help
Okay,
there.
great. Yeah. So and I've been to some parks, especially when you show up early in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday where it's obvious that folks have been partying there the night before and people kind of leave out, some trash and stuff. So I think that, really prioritizing those public resources and making sure that they're being maintained, and that that we're really making sure that in every community that kids have access to a nice park.
Yeah, it really points out the duality of our responsibility too, though, because it's not the city doing the littering. It's us. It's the community,
yeah,
right?
and really having like a sense that this is a resource for everyone, so that folks want to take care of it. Yeah. And there's a trash can right there. Like, why is your bottle? And I don't want to get into like responsibility politics and like a lot of blaming people.
Yeah, no, but
for conditions. But yeah, there's a simple step, and a lot of people do actually. There's park cleanup days in lots of neighborhoods in Durham where folks will go out and clean up creeks and clean up parks and really get involved.
We do a great job of that.
Bringing more
in
people
various
into that
places.
kind of work.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you're ideally positioned to have some of those conversations and to network between people who are part of this, non-governmental, nonprofit world and city government. I want to give you one more, not necessarily a layup, but just to let the people think about who you are kind of question. What would you tell us about motherhood and your two children and the kind of lessons that you might take from that into politics? Because I think when people look at your route, it's obviously less than traditional, but people are far more willing than they were 20 or 30 or even 10 years ago to accept that there are valuable lessons from motherhood that can be applied to politics. So what would you say that you've learned in that way?
Well, I think in particular in this moment around Black Lives Matter, having two Black sons, I've been thinking a lot about motherhood and parenting in our current social and political context. And I think that a lot of why I do the work that I do and why I want to continue to do this work and part of the city council is really to build a city and to build a community where I want to raise my children, and where I think everyone would be happy to raise kids and expect that their kids can prosper and thrive and have what they need. So I think that there's a lot of ethical consideration. I think in being a parent, I think about things from the perspective of someone who really wants their kids to succeed, and everyone wants their kids to succeed, and everyone wants their kids to have access to the educational opportunities that they need to succeed, and to the social opportunities that they need. And so I feel like I'm able to take what I want from my own children and my own family and think about providing that on a larger scale to everyone in Durham, and really making sure that, parents in Northeast Central Durham have the same faith and confidence in what the city is doing for them as parents in Trinity Park or in Watts Hillendale.
I love it. I'm a believer. I think that's sort of the reason motherhood matters. I really believe that that's, if we want to change things on a much larger scale, that might be how we do it. I don't know. I grew up in the era of like Sting and him saying if the Russians love their children too, obviously there'd be no nuclear war. Why would we have a war if both sides love their children? And, some of those...
That's a terrible thing to say.
Right? But some of those really simple, basic ideas of like, we wouldn't fight war if we thought about the children. Who wants to send their children to war? No one.
But we aren't, the community, the people, the parents of people who are going to war aren't making that decision. Most of the time it's, folks in power in the government who aren't considering the ordinary people and how their lives are going to be destroyed. And I mean, this is way beyond the scope of city council, but, we have
small.
this huge refugee crisis now. Where, all of these decisions that are being made on these global levels, you can see the impact on just ordinary people. So, I think that there's a lot, everyone wants to do well, everyone wants their kids to do well, and there's a commonality in being human that we can draw on and really build for justice with.
I'm a believer. We start with that commonality and we build outward from the home through the community to the city, the state, and the whole world if we can. So I really appreciate it. I hope you have a tremendous campaign.
Thank
Enjoy.
you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. It was terrific. I love to have these conversations. We're delighted to have talked to City Council candidate Jillian Johnson. Durham, we curate your city.